You know, I travel across the state, and I talk to a lot of folks, as we all do. And what I find is that people are angry. They're angry because the average CEO is making 300 times what the average worker is making. They're angry because since the 1970s, the average worker salary has gone up 11%, while the average CEO salary has gone up 1,000%. They're angry because they can't understand their health insurance bills, and they can't understand why it is that in this great country they can't even afford health insurance. I talked to a farmer down in Goodhue County, and I asked him, I said, what was the number one input for your farm? What's the number one expense? And he said, it's our health insurance. $34,000 a year to provide coverage for his family, his son, his wife, and himself. And he said, here's the worst part, and he pointed across the street, which was Dakota County. And he said, if my mailbox was on the other side of the street, my health insurance bill would be $10,000 less. How in the hell can we have a healthcare system that is that Byzantine, that inexplicable, and that beyond comprehension? We need to fix this system, and we need to fix what we have in this country to make sure that every family has economic security. I've led the fight for the last 12 years as the mayor of the city of St. Paul. I've led the fight for comprehensive, common sense gun laws to make sure that the children in the city of St. Paul are safe from illegal guns flooding our community. I've made St. Paul an internationally recognized leader on the battle against climate change. I've stood up for our workers and stood side by side with our union brothers and sisters to make sure that they had the job that they needed to support their families. And I stood up with our minority communities, with our people of color and our immigrant communities, unwavering in my support of our immigrant community, to make sure that everyone in the city of St. Paul had the resources that they needed, and every worker in the city of St. Paul understood implicit bias and understood the history of racism in this country. Because I wanted to make sure that when they went to work in the morning, they were working on behalf of everyone in the city of St. Paul. That's the fight I want to take to the state of Minnesota. That's the fight I want to lead as the next governor. That is our progressive vision for the future of the state of Minnesota. Minnesota has a history and a reputation for being the state that leads. I want to lead that fight into the future, to fight against all of the craziness that's happening in Washington, all the craziness that the Republicans want to bring on to the state of Minnesota. We have an incredible state. It will be incredible. It will be even more incredible when it works for everyone in our community. Thank you so much for your time.
Now we'll proceed to questions. We have questions that were submitted by attendees of the forum. And we'll rotate the order for answering the questions. So the first question will have Aaron Murphy answer first. The second question will have Tim Wallace, and so forth. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to answer each question. And again, we have a timekeeper in the front row to help us with that. So, the first question. What do you think is the best way to approach healthcare for the benefit of the citizens of the state of Minnesota?
I have been working in healthcare and health policy for all of my professional career, first taking care of people as a nurse, and then working on health policy. The first work that I did when I worked for the Minnesota Nurses Association was organizing nurses' support for the passage of Minnesota Care 25 years ago. 25 years ago, Minnesota said, it's not right for people to work full-time and not have access to health care coverage through their employer, and if they're working full-time, they can get it another way. And we created Minnesota Care. We led the nation with that. In this campaign, I am astounded at the stories that people are telling me about the cost of their health care. And yes, people are getting access to coverage, and thanks to the Affordable Care Act, we have a low rate of uninsurance here in the state of Minnesota. But the costs are out of control, whether it's surprise billing in Medicare, pharmaceutical drug costs, deductibles. People are very worried that they cannot get access to health care. They can't afford it. It is time for us to take that next step and lead like we did 25 years ago. And I propose that we use Minnesota Care as its foundation and allow anyone who wants to buy into Minnesota Care across the state of Minnesota. And then we must build the infrastructure to contract directly with the providers and with the healthcare systems and put our nurses and our doctors and our hospitals back in charge of healthcare and move the health plans right out of that equation, because that's when we're going to get better care and better outcomes. We're going to get our providers in charge again. Our providers are going to be happy with that. It's time to invest again in our workforce in healthcare. It's time time for us to invest again in primary care, because we know when there are primary care providers all over the state of Minnesota, people are going to get better care. We're short in mental health care. We're short in care for people with disabilities. We have a tremendous amount of work to do as an aging population lives all over the state of Minnesota. And I know because we've done it before. We are a state that leads on this issue. I have the head and the heart to do that with you, and I can't wait to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with much of what Erin says. She's right about Minnesota Care. She's right about the buy-ins. I think what all of us know, and you hear the stories up here, every single person in Minnesota has a story about health care. It is that basic fundamental human right. You didn't have to have a parent pass when you were young. It was only a matter of time before you saw this. It's the moral imperative of this, that it is a basic human right. We need to continue to understand that the ACA did that. It made that ingrained into the public. They understand that. And that pre-existing conditions are something you're not going to be discriminated against. It did not necessarily change some of the fundamental drivers of the costs and the things that happen, because Paul's right too. Just because you have a guaranteed access to it, if you can't afford it, it's the same as not having it. And just because you can afford it, and you even have the insurance to do it, if you don't have a provider in that area, you don't have access to it. And we're seeing that in places like Albert Lea, where we see consolidations amongst the big healthcare delivery system. So what we did, and I'm very proud of this, I ran in 2006 on the idea that everybody needed to be covered. I voted for the ACA, and I voted 70 times to protect and expand on it. Keep in mind, we had no help in doing that. That's why the real decisions are going to be made in St. Paul. They're going to be made by the next governor. They are not going to be made in Washington, because I watch it daily. We're going to debate nonsense every single day. They're not going to do anything to try and direct that. We're going to have to take that up. But there's things that we can do, because we have infrastructure in this state that no one else has. We have those institutions of higher learning. We have places like the Mayo Clinic. We have private sector things. We can do the research into this. And really, let's start having the conversation that goes beyond insurance and gets to well care. Starts working on the front end. Start preventing diabetes. Start doing the research into that. Start making sure that we're tackling those big things that are out there while we're getting people that primary care that saves that. And then start to understand that if we continue to separate mental health care from any other health care, we are going to lose this battle. And in the VA system, where I tackled the idea of veteran suicides, we had innovative things like the Clay Hunt Suicide Prevention Act that allowed us to use the resources that were in the community to make the difference. We can do this in Minnesota. We must do it in Minnesota. And when we do it, we're not morally right, we're economically right. We have a healthier, stronger workforce. And again, by any measure of success, happiness and health is what people want.
So one of the big things that I liked about Bernie Sanders was that he was talking about single-payer health care. He was talking about it, and as I said before, I've been for single-payer health care for many, many years, because it's been utterly clear that insurance has no role, really, no helpful role in our healthcare system. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And so healthcare, it's not only an issue of life or death to be able to get the healthcare you need when you need it. This is a huge economic issue for Minnesota families. Now, it's really hard when you say, what are you exactly going to do if you're the governor? Because as you all understand, a lot of the money for healthcare flows through the federal government. And so it's really hard to know exactly what our situation is going to be. And also, Republicans in Minnesota have now sent us into a deficit situation with their tax bill in particular. So we have a really difficult situation here. But I think there are a number of things that we can do that we probably will be able to do to at least move the ball forward right away. One is the buy-in to Minnesota Care. I think we also need to try to pilot a single-payer program, maybe with one type of health care, for example, dental care. Wouldn't it be great if we could say everybody in the state gets dental care and we pay for it out of one bucket? Yeah, because dental care is health, and it's not that expensive, and it's something that would really help everyone. Many, many people aren't getting the dental care they need. So this is a fundamental issue for me. I've been working against the insurance companies for years. I sometimes joke that if there was ever a bomb under my car, that's who you should go talk to. Because I've taken them on in the legislature. I've had bill after bill, and I talk all the time about getting them out of our public programs where they're just wasting our money. And I think we need to get them out of our healthcare system altogether. It's about health care, not health insurance. Thank you.
So my son has a condition he was born with, an endocrine condition, that he needs treatment for medicine for, medicine every day and treatment about 4 times a year. We need to go see the doctor. And every time I go see the doctor, I think how lucky I am to be in a situation where I can get him that care. And that came down really clearly to me about a month ago when I was talking on the phone to a guy from St. Paul who also had a son. And the son was on his insurance until he was 26 and he had diabetes. When he turned 26, he lost his health care because he was working a job that didn't offer it. He couldn't be on his parents anymore. He started to cut back on his insulin and he died. We can talk about the money, we can talk about the cost of health care, but that is what this debate is about, because that is outrageous in the most wealthy country in the world in history. We cannot allow that to happen. I support Medicare for all. I support single payer because we have to help that individual. And to me, it comes down to the lessons that my parents taught me by their example. They always sacrificed to make sure that my sister and I could get ahead. And to me, the healthcare debate is about that. It's about paying it forward. I'm healthy today. There's some people that are sick, and I should help them pay for their healthcare because I know someday I'm going to be sick, and someone else is going to be coming up behind me to help me out. If we have that as our value, we're going to get the kind of care system that we need. But we can't stop there. It's not just about who's paying for healthcare. It's about how we deliver healthcare. And we need to be much more creative and innovative about how we deliver healthcare, where we're bringing in not just the healthcare providers, but social service providers, mental health experts, to care for the whole person. We need to invest in public health in this state. We've done an amazing job there. The Republicans want to take that back. We can't let them do that. We need to invest in research and development in this state. We can be the state that actually cures diabetes. Think of the cost savings we would get from that. Could we do that as our mission in Minnesota? We can do that. We need to have a broad vision of what we can accomplish in the state around healthcare, because at the end of the day, if one more person dies, we have failed all of ourselves. Thank you.
Well, this issue is getting very personal real quick because I'm out of a job in a couple of weeks. You may have heard we got a great new mayor over in St. Paul, Melvin Carter, who's going to I'm excited about that. So that's the good news. The bad news is I got to either find a health insurance plan or I got to go on COBRA. And it will cost me $2,400 a month for health insurance if I have to go on a COBRA plan. Well, that's the bad news. The good news is my wife found a wonderful plan. $1,400 a month with a $6,000 deductible. So if you can imagine a person in my circumstance, fully middle class, and fully, had all the blessings of this country, and I'm struggling to find health insurance. Imagine what it is like for people that are low income, that are immigrants, that are struggling in this community. This is an insane system. There's not going to be a lot of difference. There's not a lot of light in between what we believe in here. We have to get to universal, affordable, comprehensive coverage for everyone in the state of Minnesota. But it's not a light switch that we can just turn on. To get to a single-payer system, we have to build that system. And we have to start with the expansion of a public option in the state of Minnesota, so that I would have that option of buying into that system. But the fact of the matter is, our system is broke because the Republicans have intentionally broken it. The Affordable Care Act was a system that we could have built on. And with a few corrections, we could have made that system work. But the Republicans in Congress and the Republicans in the state legislature don't want that system fixed. They are preying on us by breaking that system even further. They're rewarding their friends in pharmaceutical companies that are selling opioids to our children and killing our children by the scores across the United States of America. And they are pillaging their way through the middle class and lower income folks in this country. We need to build that system. We need to get to universal, comprehensive, affordable care in the state of Minnesota. But the difference is, as a leader of the city of St. Paul, I know how to build those systems, and I know how that we can get there together, because that will be our goal.
All right, so the way we do this is we follow the Healthy Minnesota Plan. It is on my website, RebeccaOtto.com. We talked about it a long time. It's time to do it, because we can't afford not to do it, right? We've got to do it, and lives depend on it, and so it's not too hard. We can do it, and I'll tell you, as I travel the state, and I tell people about my plan that you can find on the website, they're deeply excited about it. In fact, there was a Republican that came to one of my listening sessions, and he said, Rebecca, we've got to get to single-payer health care. And he's right. We're at a watershed moment. And frankly, people are sick and tired of being scared and fearing for losing their homes, fearing for going bankrupt, fearing for... So what we need to do is get to a system where everybody's covered, everybody has a standard benefit set. We need to move away from fee-for-service, for being paid for a procedure, and move to a reimbursement per enrollee, quarterly upfront, risk-adjusted, and put the joy back in healthcare for our medical professionals, get away from the coding and billing, get the insurers out of the way. And then we put the provider and the patient back in the center of healthcare. You get to choose, and they are rewarded and incented to make you healthy. Doesn't that sound great? I agree. So the thing is this, where's the money? The money's there. You ask the feds for waivers. We're going to get waivers. Nothing is impossible. And then so 50% of our spending right now is already government, federal and state. So we're going to put it all in one protected fund at the state level. We're going to define a standard set of benefits. We're going to tell employers, look, you're already spending a ton. Divert it to this fund. We're going to tell other folks, you're paying premiums, deductibles, and out of pocket. Let's divert it into that fund. We're going to take workers' comp. We're going to divert it into that fund. And we are going to create a single-payer system. And it's not that hard because our future depends on it. And frankly, Minnesotans will be able to make much better decisions about their lives. If they need to stay home with a loved one, they can. They're not going to lose their health insurance. If you want to go and start that business you've always wanted to, you can, because you're not going to lose your health insurance. If you want to retire and you want to, you don't have to worry about your child, they don't have to stay in your health insurance because they've already got it, or their health care, not health insurance. Insurance is going away. You can do that. So we need to do that for ourselves and for our future. Thank you.
The question is, as governor, how would you bridge the cultural and racial divide between the metro and greater Minnesota to try to unify our residents? What does this look like from a policy and engagement standpoint?
Yeah, the strength of this state has always been our diversity. It's been our diversity not just racially or culturally, it's been our diversity geographically. That we have the strength of one of the great cities in America, in the Twin Cities, and we have diverse economic activity spread across that. My congressional district that I represent today is, again, it's the 9th largest agricultural district in America. It also has massive manufacturing. Many of you might not know, we're pouring steel in steel mills down in Winona. We're manufacturing some of the most high-tech things for aircraft in Faribault, Minnesota, and we have Mayo Clinic and other research going on. This idea, and again, our Republican friends are very good about finding ways to divide us. The job of Governor of Minnesota is to bind us together on those common core values that we have. So there's no doubt, there's differences in this. Delivering education to Bethune Elementary, when you go up and read to those kids, or you go out to Worthington and try and deliver that. The Governor of Minnesota's job, and representing a rural district, is understanding that the challenges that we have are our strengths. These are the things that we can bring to Minnesota. We need to be telling people out there and need to know the reason Highway 14 in southern Minnesota isn't 4-lane all the way from New Ulm to Rochester is not because we're building transit in Minneapolis. It's because Republicans don't have the courage to fund transit that needs to be done. The government of Minnesota can do it. That divide fosters a cultural divide. And what we can do is make sure that all Minnesotans feel like they have a seat at the table. You're going to see something different in the signs up here. My sign is 2 of us. It's Peggy Flanagan and myself. And the idea is that inside the progressive movement, there are things that we can do that can make sure that the decisions we make that are most impacting people, that those people most impacted are at the table. People in greater Minnesota feel that's not happening because Republicans have left them behind. I know we can talk to them. I know we can bring them in, and I know we can create a stronger state.
So I do think that this idea that there's this big split between the metro area and rural Minnesota is really largely a creation of the Republican messaging. And what we must not do as Democrats is just react to the Republican message. Because when I go and talk to people in greater Minnesota, I'm from greater Minnesota too, Rochester, third largest city in the state, but, you know, that's greater Minnesota too, and I talk to people all the time who don't agree with me, because about 40% of my district is still Republican, even though I've been elected there 7 times. But, you know, people want the same things. People are struggling economically all across the state. And the difference is, you know, people need different things to help them in different places, but they all are unified by the desire to have a decent living, to have a good education for their kids, to have clean water, to have broadband, which is something that even in Rochester, we don't have decent broadband. That's something we need all over the state. So I think we are much more united than we are divided in the things that people really care about. And what we must not do is think that we have to be like Republicans and somehow go and pander to the Trump voter and try to be more Republican, you know, Republican-ish in order to bring in the rural voter, because we need to give people in the metro area and across the state something to vote for. That's our problem. It's not that we have to win rural Minnesota, although it's, you know, we should be talking to everyone. Absolutely we should. But we need to understand that people are struggling in the metro area too, and that too often people don't see anything to vote for because they don't understand that we're for them, because sometimes, in fact, we're not really for them. So we need to be for the ordinary people of Minnesota, and if we are with them, then they will be with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you for this question, whoever asked it, because it really is an important one. And it's complicated. There's a couple things that are raised in this. The first thing talks about racial disparities in this state, and we need to separate that out a little bit. The fact of the matter is, we are ranked the second most unequal state in the nation. And that is an abomination for Minnesota to be in that situation. And we need to be talking about that regardless of what people might think the political costs are about that, because we have to take that on. In fact, it is probably the number one threat that we face here in the state of Minnesota going into the future. A moral threat and economic threat, the number one threat. And we need to take it on. And the only way we do that is if we are intentional about it. If we actually acknowledge it and talk about it in every part of the state. When I entered this race, I did a tour of the state. I was going up in western Minnesota the day the Philandro Castile verdict came out. And I talked to people in town after town after town in western Minnesota about what that decision meant, what that verdict meant. And time and again, we had an amazing conversation about what we share about this state, about the fact that we need justice and fairness in this state. People get that everywhere in the state, and we need to take that to them everywhere in the state. We're not going to win this race, and it doesn't matter if we win this race if we don't solve the racial disparities in this state, quite frankly. The gap between rural and urban, all of these gaps, we have lots of gaps in this state. There are lots of divisions in this state that people can create. And the first thing is we actually have to acknowledge that there's some reality to it. Where you live actually to try to create your worldview. And so we need to speak to people where they live. We can't ignore the fact or try to paper it over with nice talk about one Minnesota. We are one Minnesota, but we need to acknowledge those differences. But what I will tell you is the solutions are very similar. When you're up in Leech Lake and you hear that they're spending $70 million a year in healthcare, but not a single dime of that is staying on that reservation because it's going to Sanford Health and private equity firms that own the clinics, and the wealth is fleeing that place, you have the same problem you have in North Minneapolis, where we're not making investments in ownership in that district so that people can actually can benefit from the productivity that they have in that district. It's the same issue. We need to make sure that people in this state, we need to make sure that everybody in this state has a way to get ahead and keep the wealth that they're producing, and it's not going to the well-connected and very wealthy few in this country. That is the issue that unites us. That is the issue that unites us, the power of that tight control power. We need to take that out in this state.
Well, the question can really be broken down into 2 parts. First of all, how we win, and then second of all, how we govern. Let me start with the second part of that. We govern when we sit down with mayors, local elected officials, residents, workers across the state of Minnesota, and we listen to them. And we don't engage in this zero-sum game. Either you're for a kid on the east side of the city of St. Paul, or you're for a farmer, or a laborer up in northern Minnesota. When we sit down and we listen and we say, you know what, farmers, we all have the goal of having clean water. How do we get there together? And we don't send someone out from St. Paul or Minneapolis that has never been on a farm and tell them how they're going to run their operation, because that's the surest way to make sure that they never vote for us in the future. But how we get elected is by being true to our values. The progressive values that Paul Wellstone spoke so eloquently about. He never went out and said, I'm Republican light. He never went out and said, I'm kind of going to dumb down my progressive values. He stood strong and said exactly what he believed in. And he said, I stand for the little fella, not the Rockefeller. Mark Dayton, when he ran for governor, went out across the state of Minnesota and said, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the taxes on the wealthiest Minnesotans, because that's what's fair and that's what's necessary. He didn't run away from his progressive values, and not only did he not run away from them, he won on those and then he governed on those. We will never win by being Republican light. We will never win by standing with the NRA. We will never win by standing against Syrian refugees coming into this country. That is not who the DFL party is. That is not who progressives are. We win when we're true to our progressive values. When we govern with those values, we hold office, and we move the state of Minnesota forward. That is how we address the issue of the urban-rural divide.
So when I launched my listening tour in January, there's certain truths that whether you live on a reservation in North Minneapolis, in Crookston or Caledonia, or May Township, the same things keep us up at night. Keeping a roof over our head, food on our tables, clothes on our back, and our health. And I've run and won statewide 3 times. I worked with city officials, fire chiefs, volunteer firefighters, town supervisors. They know me, they like me, they trust me. And government finance is the same no matter where you go in the state. But they're all trying to do a good job for their people in their community. So these truths that keep us up at night, what I did was I decided I needed to create an agenda that was meaningful for all Minnesotans, for everybody. Everybody could see themselves inside my agenda, and it's very bread and butter. And when some Minnesotans have said to me, well, those people, they started talking about those people, I said, look, we are all Minnesotans. We might not always like each other, we might not always agree with each other, and we might not always get each other, but we must care about each other. And one of the common values we have as Minnesotans is we care about the common good. And my campaign slogan is, we've got to end the politics of unfettered greed and make sure we're focusing on the policies and the politics of the common good, because that is what government is for. And so I have run and won statewide 3 times. I won more rural counties than Pawlenty. I win more rural counties than Governor Dayton. I won over 50% of the counties across the state. And so it's really about making sure that everybody feels included and that they have equality of opportunity. Equality of opportunity. And that means that 2-year free tuition in the Minnesota state system. And that means $15 an hour, that you can come close to supporting yourself. And someone said, Rebecca, isn't that too much for Greater Minnesota? I said, why is it too much for Greater Minnesota? They're having a hard time keeping people in the community. So we have lots of work to do, and we can. Thank you.
I like people a lot, and Minnesota is a great, big, tall state, and I've spent the last 11 years getting to know Minnesotans and letting them get to know me. I've been in our schools, and our clinics, and our hospitals. I've been in farm fields and businesses and in combines. I've spent my time on the ground, knocking on doors, getting to know Minnesotans, letting them get to know me. And people do feel left behind because the economy, Minnesota's great economy, isn't working for a lot of people. In Blaine, I met with a bunch of people and they said, we're left behind here. It's the first thing they said to me, because we've got a highway that needs development and it's not getting done in the bonding bill because the legislature is messed up. I spent time with a guy who toured me through a dairy processing plant in Melrose, Minnesota. He was dressed in black and he would not make eye contact with me until we got into the place. And he toured us around and he was so proud of what they were doing with milk and separating it into its parts and making cheese. He was proud of the fact that there were people of color from East Africa that were working in that plant. And when we got done, I said, can we get a picture taken together? And he said, you know what? I'm wearing black today because I didn't want to spend my day with a Democrat, but I like you. Let's get our picture taken together. I was in New London, Minnesota on St. Patrick's Day. I met with a group of women who were using should go there, they've got really great beer. And they asked me, how are you gonna win out there? They do have great beer. How are you gonna win out there? You're not from here. I said, you know what, we're more alike than we are different. And she looked at me and I said, it's important that we focus on the things that build our community. Strong schools, single-payer healthcare, jobs to support our families. She said, stop right there. She said, when you said we're more alike than we're different, I didn't agree with you. But that agenda, I agree with that. We have to recognize that our districts are different across the state of Minnesota and they have different needs. We have to listen and consider those issues. And Minnesotans want to know someone's going to stick with them and fight for them. And they've seen that in me for the last 11 years. And I will continue to do that as the state's governor. Thank you.
Next question, we'll start with Representative Tina Liebling. And the question is, where do you stand on building an oil pipeline in the state?
Well, I hope I don't have to use all 2 minutes to answer that one. You know, climate change is an enormous issue. I mean, look what's happening in California. Have you all seen the news? It's horrifying. And that's just one of the latest manifestations already. So this is a crisis. And we're talking about building a new oil pipeline. Well, oil is not the fuel of the future. Oil is the fuel of the past. And I don't think that, you know, there are a lot of reasons to be against that. But one of the big ones is, for me, we've got to make investments in moving away from oil just as quick as we can to a clean energy economy. So I'm absolutely
Tina's absolutely right. We do need to move toward a clean energy economy as quickly as we can. There's no question about that, and we have made some actually amazing progress here in Minnesota. One of the things we did when I was Speaker of the House was we passed the first ever nation-leading solar energy standard that made solar energy explode across the state of Minnesota in the last 3 or 4 years. But in that plan, what we did, we put the price of carbon in it. That's the first time in this country, I believe, we adopted an energy policy that actually put the price of carbon into the price that utilities have to pay solar energy people, solar energy developers for the energy that they produce. It's that kind of creative thinking that's going to get us to the clean energy economy that we all want to get to. I oppose the current route of Line 3. I don't think that it should be going through the headwaters of the Mississippi. I don't oppose flat-out pipelines in this state, because we need to make a transition to a clean energy economy as well, and we're not going to do it overnight. What we actually need to do in this state and in this country is come up with a comprehensive plan to get there. So we're not dealing on one-off issues time and time again and having fights on one-off issues time and time again. If we have a comprehensive policy that looks at our whole clean energy and our whole energy economy, we can actually make smart decisions and informed decisions and decisions that are supported by science to move in the direction that we need to go. So we need to keep our waters clean. That is a fundamental thing in this state. That's something that is going to be a huge economic advantage and quality of life advantage